So a question that I get asked a lot is, how do I actually score a film? Like, how do I just know what works when I'm sitting down to write for a scene? You know, what's the secret ingredient to making a scene click? And the truth is, I don't fucking know what I'm doing. Every single time I sit down to score a scene, I'm just like, what the fuck? Because, I mean, as the viewer, when we're watching like a TV show or a movie, this is all we see. But then as the composer, this is what we're given to work with. When you're watching it like that, side by side, it's almost like laughable or awkward because it's like, well, clearly it's so weird without music, right? But that's what us as composers need to work with. And then with the music, you could take it in so many different directions. Take these two entries, for example. The music is going to completely change the mood of the scene, and that's entirely in your control. Now, before I launch into this is not going to be a video on how to write music. It's just going to be a guide to scoring films, so the process and kind of the theory behind working with directors and working on the film itself. So with that in mind, where do you start with scoring for a scene? And it's really simple, the director. Before I get to the director, most films you work on are going to have a temp track or are going to have reference tracks. Do not, for the love of God, do not listen to the temp track just yet. I know it's tempting. You should only go to the temp track if the director is sending you to listen to the temp track specifically. If the director says, I want you to listen to, 10 seconds into the temp track, it has this really cool sound, or it hits this beat specifically, I want you to do that with the music. Don't just listen to the temp track for influence. Don't. It's gonna fuck you up. Trust me, I'm speaking from experience. Listening to the temp track will fuck you up completely and it'll throw your process off. Unless the director tells you to listen to it, just throw the temp track in the bin, don't bother with it. On to the first point. At the start of every project, I call the director. Skype, FaceTime, doesn't matter. I want to make sure that every single note I'm putting down for this score is exactly what the director has in their mind. Just asking the director, what music do you want, is the wrong way to go about it because directors don't usually know anything about music. What I usually do is ask the director one simple question. Why are you making your film? Once you talk about this with the director, you'll know exactly how to approach the project. Because once you understand why the film is being made, you can find a marriage between the story and the music so easily that it'll just come almost naturally to you. Now, the why of making the film might be something as serious as raising awareness for a really strong political issue, or it might be something like just making a movie for fun. I recently worked with a wonderful director from Canada on a mini-series called Films in Fragments. And when I asked him why he's actually working on the project, he told me he wanted to explore the ideas of making like these mini little 20-30 second clips of films that don't actually exist. So like these mini trailers for films that don't exist. Automatically, I realized that everything I'd already thought about the scenes went out the window. I initially thought it was like these 5 mini series that were all somehow connected. And I started thinking about themes that I could tie in together. And no, all of that just went out the window, and I realized that each film had to have its own unique sound. I couldn't start tying in motifs from, episode 1 and 2 to episode 3 and 4 because they were completely different. The second thing that this helped me understand was that the music didn't have time to linger. I don't have time to, draw out a really long intro and draw out a melody, and the music needs to come in, do its thing, and leave. Now, if I didn't know why the director was making the film, and I just went, what music do you want? He would have told me, kind of what he wants for each thing, but I wouldn't really understand what the project is, and I wouldn't really understand why the project is being made. Now, after I talk with the director about the why of the project, I'll obviously talk with them about all the other things. So like, how do they want to approach the music? What kind of music do they like? What kind of music do they want? Which beats do they want to hit? What are the important styles and themes? What are the most emotional scenes? All these kind of things that will really help me get a general idea of what the film is about. Once you feel like you understand the director's vision, you can go on and you can start building a map. Now, a map of the project doesn't really have anything to do with composing just yet. What it is it's just a general overview of like the entire film or the entire series or whatever. So the first thing you want to mark down on your map is like certain beats and timestamps. So for example, if there's someone that starts crying, that's a really big important moment, and you want to mark that down as like, insert sad music here. Once you finish kind of laying out the beats and the timestamps for the entire project, you want to move on and you want to start laying out really, really rough ideas and themes. Now, by this I mean you're not really drafting the final version of the theme, although sometimes that might carry over. You just want to get general moods. I recently worked on a sci-fi short called Undo, which was so much fun. It was probably one of my favorite films that I've worked on this year. And the first piece of music I composed was actually like a really short cello piece for one of the most emotional scenes in the movie. And the reason I started with this short cello piece is the director just went, I know that I want a cello there. I just want a cello in that scene. After I finished writing my beats and my timestamps for my map, I went there and I improvised this cello line. I didn't end up keeping it. I threw it out afterwards. But when I came back to that scene about 2 weeks later, I already had something to build off and I was like, okay, I kind of know the mood I'm trying to create here. So what you're trying to do with this map building is you're trying to create a general mood for all these little scenes. Now that doesn't mean go overboard and just create a mood for the entire movie. No, it just means for those really important moments and those really important beats, you want to create like a little mood or a general feeling so that when you come back to score that scene, it's just going to make sense to you. On a lot of films that I've worked on, there's been this one pivotal scene that the director really, really wants to work on, and that'll be the first one I start with, because once you start with the most emotionally dense scene, you can kind of build all the themes up from there for the rest of the film. I usually start off with composing 2 to 3 drafts for this one scene, and I know a lot of you will be thinking either that's not enough, or that's way too much, just compose the one and see how you go. The reason I do 2 to 3 drafts is because usually at the start of a project, it's going to be the director's first taste of what you like, and it's going to be your first taste of what the director kind of wants. So you want to give the director as many options as you can for this first scene. There are a couple of scenarios that can arise from this. The first one, which is the easiest one, and that's the director just likes one of the drafts and you just move on with that. That's such a nice feeling and it just makes your life easier. The second most common scenario is that the director turns around and says, all of these are shit, start again. That second scenario is one that is not the most common, but it will happen more than you think. You're going to send the director 2 or 3 drafts and they're going to turn around and be like, no. None of these work. Now that doesn't mean you're a shitty composer, it just means that you need to give it another shot. Create another 3 drafts and make them even more varied. Make one like an extreme gent metal style and make one just a full ambient cinematic classical piece. See what they like. Now of course this is going to vary from project to project, but what you want to do is make sure that you are trying to understand what the director wants and their vision. So if you're stuck on this point again, go back to the first point and talk to the director. I think the best way to kind of deal with rejection when you really become attached to a piece is to not get attached in the first place. I've made the mistake of getting attached to themes with characters, sending it to a director a week later and then just going, no, this is shit, it's not even close to what I wanted. And me going, they're not your children, just let go of them. It's just something you've made. Make another piece. That's all you need to do. If you really like the piece you've made, save it for another project, save it for yourself, but by all means don't try and force it on the director. The director knows what they want and you need to bend to that. So once you and the director have agreed on a draft, it's actually time to start finishing the draft. Now, unless you're planning on getting live instruments, this means finishing a final mix for the director to hear. I like to kind of finish up one scene and then move on to the next scene once that's completely finished because it'll give me the best kind of grounding and platform to go off to compose the rest of the film. The most important thing to remember while you're working is that work is not linear. And by that I mean, if you've got 2 minutes of a score to finish, don't expect to do, 10 seconds a day every day. One day you might get 30 seconds done and the next 2 days you might get nothing done whatsoever even though you're sitting there for an even longer amount of time. So the most important thing when you're scoring to picture, or actually the most important thing when you're doing anything, is to make sure that you're being consistent. Spend at least 2 hours a day every day trying to compose to this piece. Whether you get 0 seconds of good music, why is the dog barking? Whether you get 0 seconds of final music or whether you get 30 seconds of final music, you just got to compose every day because over time, the average amount of work that you'll actually output will get bigger. So if you find that you're spending 2 hours a day and you're just getting 5 seconds of work done out of that, that's fine. Give it another year and that 2 hours a day will turn into maybe like a minute of music getting done. Consistency in work is not there to ensure that you get 10 out of 10 results every day. It's there to ensure that you're not getting 0 out of 10 results every single day. Getting something done is better than getting nothing done, and I really recommend that you stay consistent with your work. So don't get discouraged. There are going to be days where you get nothing done and that's okay. Now, I would definitely keep the director in the loop whenever you make big changes. So for example, if you're suddenly changing a chord progression or you're changing a big instrumentation or you're adding a lot to the piece, send an update to the director. If you just change the sound of the piano, maybe that's not a big deal. You don't have to update the director every 5 minutes. Send them a draft when you make a big change just to make sure that you guys are on the same page. So then once you've actually finished your final mix, send it to the director and just keep making those revisions until both you and the director are happy with it. Now, the rest of the film. The way you score the rest of the film is to do that process again for every scene. Draft a piece, send it to the director, get feedback, change it, draft a piece, send it to the director, and keep looping and keep going until both you and the director are happy with what's there. This entire process might not work for you, and as a director or composer watching this, you might be like, what the fuck is this dude talking about? He has no idea. This is just the process that's worked for me and the directors that I've worked with, but every director and every composer are going to have their own unique approach to making a film, and that's okay. There are definitely going to be some things in this video that will help you, and there are going to be some things that you might not need to hear. But my hopes in making this video, both for composers and directors, is to help guide you to work together and to understand each other. Before I wrap up this video, I'm going to do a quick recap of the most important points. Point 0, do not listen to the temp. I know it's tempting, it'll throw you off your game, it'll muddle up your ideas, and you're not going to be as creative as you can be. First point is talk to the director, make sure that you understand exactly what their vision is and ask them why they're making their film. Understanding why they make their film is crucial in creating music that matches it perfectly. After you've talked to the director, you want to build your map, you want to label the right beats, you want to label the timestamps you want to hit, and you want to label where you think you might need music and drafting a general mood board. Once you've finished your map, you want to start composing 2 or 3 drafts to send to the director. These might get rejected, these might get accepted. The most important thing with this point is to make 2 or 3 drafts to send to the director and then to work their feedback into those drafts again and to make them better. Once you finish your drafts, you want to actually finish one piece for one of the scenes, send it to the director, get feedback, and keep revising it until you're happy with that one scene. And once you finish that scene, you can go into the rest of the film and do exactly the same process. Create a draft, send it to the director, revise it, repeat, repeat, repeat. Then you keep working, you keep repeating, and the job is done. The most important thing that you need to do as a composer is to bring the director's story and vision to life. My name is Nadav Cohen. Thank you so much for watching this guide. I hope it has actually helped you. I create a new video every week or two for producers, composers, and anyone who just likes music related things. I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe, but if you don't, that is 100% okay. I will see you all soon for another video. Thank you so much for watching.